Good evening, everyone. Am I audible? Madam, am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
Dr.
you are.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
At the outset, I must congratulate the Kolkata City Anesthesiology Society and for organizing such a good academic meet, or whatever you say, it's a webinar. At the same time, I must thank them for letting me a part of it. At the outset, I would like to dedicate this talk to the COVID warriors. You never know, Madam has given a lot of, the huge number of people who have been involved, and so many people that has taken place. And we have a lot of warriors, COVID warriors there, and who have sacrificed their lives and who are still fighting to win the battle. And definitely there are a lot of healthcare workers who are also involved in this. So we should pray for them and for their well-being as well. In 2016, the All India Difficult Airway Association, they came out with a guideline which was tracheal intubation in intensive care unit. And they have categorically mentioned there are three major factors which were responsible, which made the intubation very challenging in intensive care unit, especially the ICU-related factors, which is because of lack of space. You're not being able to access to the patient very easily. There lack of equipments. You don't have proper equipments at time when you need to intubate such patients or manage such patients. Timing of intubation is again a difficult because patient at time can need an intubation at night where the staffs are already exhausted. Then there could be a patient-related related factors like you don't exactly know how to assess the airway because these patients, we have the Macocha, the assessment scoring system, which is not as of very much validated. And these patients are drowsy and at times unconscious, so naturally they are not cooperative to give you a good assessment. The risk of aspiration is always there because they are full stomach, and obviously they are traumatized, having cervical fractures, so their challenging anatomy is always there. You don't get adequate time to oxygenate this patient. There's rapid desaturation of their oxygen because they are already, their physiological reserve is less. Their pathology, they have some lung pathology, and they are most of the time they're hemodynamically unstable. And most importantly, you cannot retreat, means you don't have an option to forego the definitive airway management. So you got to go for the definitive airway. And thirdly, the operator factors are there, means we don't have very good training staff. The staff are ill-trained or inadequate. The experience of the doctors at times, they are all resident doctors, so they are managing most of the hospitals. They are being managing the ICUs, and overall their working schedule, the number of people, the number of staff inadequate, so they are overstressed. Now, over and above this existing problem, which is already there in any ICU, we have what we see in a COVID ICU. All these features which I have said, factors, they are over-exaggerated. And there's increased load of patient, and so the administration are compelled or bound to go for a makeshift arrangement of ICU, where you have inadequate equipments, inadequate monitors, inadequate staff. Patients are very highly infective, so naturally they are contagious, generating a lot of aerosol. Their reserve is less, and the operator again is always having a fear factor that they will be infected. Their PP, they're wearing a PP and trying to manage these patients. We're wearing that for 6 hours or 8 hours rotation, and they're inadequate because they're being makeshift arrangement of ICU at times, and they're ill-trained as well. They're very not much trained. So what should be our primary concern in these situations? So safety of the staff is the first concern. Prevent them from contamination, decrease their exposure, make their environment conducive to work, and train them as and when possible. Most importantly, because they are not that much trained in this system, in this COVID era times, and then counsel them, because just to allay their anxiety, because they have a continuous fear factor. So got to talk to them, counsel them, allay their anxiety. Patients, obviously, always they are generating aerosol, so naturally we've got to go for a procedure which will reduce their aerosol generation. Aspiration is always an existing problem, so we've got to reduce that and stabilize the hemodynamic problem and improve their outcome. The most important thing is what all we can do so that the outcome is improved. And in the ICU, obviously, as I said, decrease the load, and most importantly, in any ICU got to frame an algorithm or a guideline. And that algorithm or guideline should be mentioned and documented so that the subsequent team know what to do in any crisis situation. So how do you overcome those concerns? Most is you have three phases to manage. One is before intubation, phase one, where we need to protect and prepare. Phase two, where is during intubation, where there is the team dynamics and technical aspects of intubation. And after intubation, what are we supposed to do? That is prevent disconnection, degowning properly, and debriefing the whole team. Sorry. So first phase is staff preparation, protection, proper hand hygiene. We already talked since evening. We are talking on this, how to protect the staff, and it should be a full from head to toe PPE kit with a goggles and face shield whenever you're trying to intubate such patient. Minimize the personnel, whoever is going for an intubating procedure, so or they're in the process of aerosol generating procedures. So naturally, you've got to minimize their exposure and take the patients to an environment where you can have a negative pressure system. So in most of the hospitals as of now in India, obviously where I'm working, we don't have a negative pressure system. So, but we have a side room where we usually take the patient so as to prevent the main ICU to be infected to a certain extent. So this is where this ICU can have an exhaust. I mean, this in room could be isolated. Where there could be two rooms simultaneously side by side, where you can have three people working in one place and the runner, he can be or she can be there to help you out in a crisis situation. So preparation of the trolley, preparation of equipments, planning is very important because you need to have a backup plan. Supposing you fail in intubating these situations, you got to have a backup plan. Assessment is an persistent problem in intensive care unit. So you got to assess whatever your assessment you've done, document it so the subsequent team knows that this is a difficult intubation or not difficult intubation. Connect the mask with an HME, which Apeksha has already said, and this ventilator circuit with also an HME so that prevent the aerosolization, at the same time prevent the ventilators as well. Use closed suction system wherever possible, and always, in fact, use video laryngoscope and disposable if possible. Prepare difficult intubation trolley because you always anticipate an intensive care unit patient a difficult intubation. So this is what is Makocher classification or scoring system, where we have 7 parameters, and if these points are more than 2, then always try to contact the senior anesthetist to help you out. And this needs to be documented in the case sheet. So phase 2 is during intubation. A lot of the talk has been taken place on this, how to intubate this patient, what all precautions you need to take. But you need to have a team dynamics where 4 C's are very important. Clearly then delineate the roles of each individual. Have a closed loop communication throughout within your team and clearly communicate the airway plan. What are you supposed to do? If you fail this, what is the next plan? So naturally you have step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 as per either guideline. Cross monitoring each other so that you know that this person is not being contaminated with the system as well. So this is what we've already seen time and again. This is don't want to go and discuss in this. During intubation, technical aspects are very important. Now, airway to be managed by most experienced person amongst your team. So he should be an intubator, and as I said always, and it has been already discussed, that always go for a low flow gas supply or oxygenation, so that you don't have a lot of aerosol generation. And you at times, since your patients are already hemodynamically unstable, it's always advisable that you can go a short dose of a bolus of vasopressors, or you can start infusing a vasopressors, because moment you try to sedate these patients, they can go land up into shock. So naturally, you can take a cover of your vasopressors. Always use a tight fitting mask with 2-hand grip, as I said, and RSI, rapid sequence intubation or delayed sequence intubation can be done wherever you think that these two, especially rapid sequence intubation is the choice. And at times you might have to land up to DSI, that means delayed sequence intubation. Always try to avoid bag mask ventilation, but if you need bag mask ventilation, try to reduce the rate of and the pressure which is generated during the bag mask ventilation. Now ensure paralysis, as it has been always emphasized, to prevent your aerosol formation by coughing and all. And moment you intubate this patient, inflate the cuff before you put the patient on a ventilator. confirm your capnography intubation with the help of a capnography, and then you can also simultaneously start your ventilation to see the chest expansion. Now, phase 3 is after intubation. Now, what are you supposed to do? Avoid unnecessarily circuit disconnection. This is very important. You don't need to, because it is very often, very commonly seen in intensive care unit that there's a disconnection of the circuit. So this needs to be prevented. Disconnection, if at all needed, always put the ventilator on standby, and if needed, you can clamp the tube as well. Monitor the intracuff pressure all throughout their stay in the ICU, because that is the place where the leaks take place, and you need to have a continuous pressure monitoring system in the cuff. There are new generation of intensive endotracheal tube where you have an indigenous cuff pressure monitoring system. So prevent tube dislodgement during positioning. This is something which happens with the staff, the caretakers, because when they position the patient, there's always a possibility of dislodgement of tube or disconnection. Insert gastric tube the moment you've intubated. If you think the patient needs some gastric tube insertion or taking a sample, you can do it at that very point of time. Now, once you've used those equipments, dispose them if it is a disposable, or sterilize them if it is a reusable system in a different separate box or a bag. Now, strict adherence to proper doping is obviously you've got to train them before coming to an ICU. They should be regularly trained. Mock drilling should be done. Simulation should be done. How to do all this doping and doning system. Perform hand hygiene after you before you leave your ICU, and at the same time try to go for team debriefing so as to show where are we at fault. Now, this is one guideline which is existing, and that is European Society of Anesthesiology, and then we have our own guideline. But as of now, today, we don't have any guideline which is pertinent algorithm, in fact. Algorithm which is in relation to intensive care unit COVID management, airway management. But obviously, we have the ICCM consensus guidelines, which is not in the form of an algorithm. So what I thought that whatever we have discussed before, if I try to incorporate them in the existing guideline, how do we change the guideline, whatever is existing with us? Now, this is the parameter, this is the table, or this is the loop which is not existing in our present guideline. So we have to keep this probably, because this is something which is very important when we talk about managing a COVID patient. So proper hand hygiene, full PPE kit, intubating in an airway or negative pressure situation, assessment of airway, and formulating a plan and prepare difficult. This is what is probably can be incorporated in the existing guideline. Now, step 1, we have 5 steps in the tracheal intubation guideline of AIDA. The first step is where we used to have 2 persons to monitor. Now we have to go for a 4-person, and out of which the best person, the experienced person, is supposed to do the intubation. Use a ramp or elevate the head if possible, because that is going to increase your apnea time, increase your reserve, and prevent your hypoxia at an early stage. So naturally, this is one thing. And if the patient is already on an NIV, let him be on an NIV with a proper tight sealing mask. But if the patient is not on NIV, try to avoid high flow nasal oxygenation. Go for a low flow with a 5 liters, provided it allows you to go for a saturation, which is around 90 plus. So infuse vasopressors, as I said before, the patients are already hypotensive, go for an HME filter both at the end and at the ventilator and towards the patient end. Go for RSI or DSI, and obviously your drug of choice would always be a ketamine and succinylcholine so as to relax. And then you can go for cricoid pressure or not go for cricoid pressure depending upon your visualization of your larynx. Now, if you think that the patient is having an unsuccessful bag mask ventilation, immediately go for an HELP. Now, when a person comes for an HELP, he has to also be having a proper doning. This is something which is it has to be incorporated in our present guideline. And naturally, if you see the oxygen saturation, I brought it down from 95% to 92%. Now, there is no consensus regarding this. What we have observed in my ICU, most of the ICUs, in fact, that the patient is having an happy hypoxia. Now, what do you mean by happy hypoxia? Is that means patient is comfortable at a very low level of oxygen, but suddenly he collapses the moment that the reserve is lost. So naturally, that has to be taken care of. And we know that the moment patient goes to 90% saturation, he goes down very fast. So naturally, we would always try to put him and have a safety margin, and that is why 92% would not be a bad target for us to go for an intubation. But again, these patients can accept the hypoxia even at a very lower low, when 85 is good enough for these patients. Now, continue nasal oxygenation, again 5 liters. We have removed this from the H and high flow nasal. Back mask ventilation with HME filter should be there, but there should be always a video laryngoscopy and the saturation, as I said. Rest of the things are same. Mask ventilation between 2 attempts of, now this is again what I kept it as 2 attempts of ventilation. If the patient having a mask ventilation successful, then we go for tracheal laryngoscopy and tracheal intubation. You can go for at least 2 attempts, and in between the 2 attempts, you can go for mask ventilation, but again at a lower rate and not at a high pressure. Optimize the patient's position, and you can go for all sort of external maneuvers, whichever is there with you. And you can at time change your devices, change your size, minima, and go for maintain the depth of anesthesia. Now, if you succeed in this, naturally, then confirm that tracheal intubation using bicapnography or bilateral chest expansion, and apply closed suction. Do not discontinue disconnection the circuit, and clamp if it is needed. So, but if it fails, if you think you failed the tracheal intubation, then you go to the step 3 where you need to go for a supraglottic airway device insertion. And there again, you continue your 5 liters of oxygen, maintain the saturation to a level of 92% above. Second generation of supraglottic is always advisable, and that is how you have to go for maximum. You can go for 2 attempts, and if you need to, if you think you have succeeded in doing this, then obviously you can go for you can go for either intubation through a supraglottic airway device, because always remember, in intensive care unit, you need a definitive airway. There's no scope of supraglottic maintaining a patient for a longer period of time. And if you think that intubation is not possible through supraglottic device, then obviously percutaneous tracheostomy, keeping all the precautions there with generation of aerosol generating procedures. Now, if you think you have not succeeded, then obviously you land up to a failed ventilation scenario where you can go for a rescue mask. Rescue mask for a last time, you can go for a better of maximum. You ensure that the patient is neuromuscular, he's relaxed, and he has there's no muscle no power in this, and he has a good muscle relaxing property, relaxant effect. And you go for a final attempt with again 2-hand grip, and then you see if you can go for a bag mask ventilation. Now, if you succeed, obviously you can go for a surgical tracheostomy or a percutaneous tracheostomy with bag mask ventilation. But if you fail it, you declare the patient to a complete ventilation failure, where you call for an additional help. Now, this additional help again should be properly done. Doning should be done, and he should be either a neurosurgeon or an ENT surgeon who is having an extra, because you have been already focused and your mind has been tubular, exhausted. So this person will be an extra help to you to have an additional thought process and additional go. So if you go for this, and if you think that the patient is not, you're not being able to do, he has to go for, you have declared the patient complete ventilation failure, where the trigger is, this is the trigger for going for a surgical tracheostomy, surgical airway. Now, when you go for a surgical airway, you should not go for a needle cricothyrotomy, because that is where you will always generate a lot of aerosol. So you always avoid it, keeping all things precautions at hand. Go for surgical cryo, or you can go for a whiteboard needle cryo. And if you are successful, obviously you convert it in the long run for a tracheostomy, surgical tracheostomy. Now, post-intubation procedure is same, keeping everything at hand. Whatever we know that patient with further airway management has to be done, treat airway edema if suspected, monitor the complications, counseling the patient, and document whatever has been happening in this patient. In addition to this, we have to keep this in mind that, and avoid unnecessary circuit disconnection. Disconnection, if needed, obviously stand by, monitor the intercuff pressure, whether it is in tracheostomy or an endotracheal tube, and insert gastric tube, dispose the disposable equipment, and perform proper hand hygiene and go for team briefing. Now, if the patient has been predicted difficult intubation, we don't have much scope with us. So what is it? We have to be very careful, because if whatever techniques which we'll be using, they are all aerosol generating process. And because if you go for topicalization, obviously there you reduce the cough, but again, ultimately you will have a lot of aerosol. If it is a flexible bronchoscope, as Amit has and previous speakers have said, that there will always be aerosol generation. So it should not be a first choice. So alternative techniques which are there available with you include a tracheal intubation via supraglottic airway device. That's the only thing which is probably to a certain extent less aerosol generating. So to summarize, Airway management in COVID ICU is a challenge. It is a challenging and it is an hazardous, potentially hazardous procedure. And the major concerns are staff safety, improve outcome. Major management can be in 3 different phases or stages. What you say, proper before, during, and after intubation. Airway management should always be elective. You should not go for an emergency. Always do an elective, because when you go for an emergency, you always land up into problem. And always for that, you need to preempt that what is the patient status, whether the patient is having a difficult intubation or not. So proper meticulous assessment should always be kept, always be done, and keep a backup planning, because you never know where you can land up to. So avoid techniques that generate aerosol. Position on ramp could be and help to you to prevent hypoxia at an early stage, so you have a better apneic time. Pre-oxygenate with low oxygen. You go for RSI or DSI. Most experienced person should always take go to the head end and use HME filter to prevent aerosol. Don't disconnect the circuit. And after intubation, advocate proper hand hygiene, degowning and debriefing, and maintain the record. So this is where I would like to, as Madam Jyotsna has already invited you, I would like to also invite you in this conference. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, you can see.
Yeah. So they have the KingView direct video laryngoscope. So they have the both blades, direct and channel.
Video is not smooth.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Actually, it happens because of the speed.
Yeah.
Usually videos don't work in webinar.
It's bandwidth problem.
Yeah, bandwidth problem.
Again, they have the channel blade. Now, there's a channel blade also.
This equipment is long since in the market, and it is
Yeah.
being used being used very frequently and regularly by most of the institutions, because it is reasonably cheaper version. Rest of the equipment are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Actually, people are using it.
And especially in COVID pandemic, so video laryngoscope is the very important.
Yeah, I have it in the COVID ICU, both ICU.
Yeah. We must have in all ICU and OR separately.
Actually, always the gold standard is CMAC, but CMAC is there in ICU. You cannot. I mean, this is obviously you can go with disposable blades. Actually, these blades are disposable.
Yes. So thank you so much. Now all Shaikat, I think.
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah. So I'll stop sharing. Yeah. So there's many questions for all the faculty. Yeah, Shaikat, will you start?
I don't have the list of the questions because I think I got disconnected. So if you have the list, you can
so so there are 2-3 questions, and one is from Gargi Nandi. What precautions should be taken while changing the tracheostomy tube in the COVID patient? Is there any recommendation? So Dr. Mohit, you can answer, please. You can.
Yeah, actually, it is always advisable that you do it with a bougie. At least you are at least far off from the patient, and put a bougie inside and then railroad it. Because if you, it depends again at what time you're changing the tracheostomy tube. If it is an early tracheostomy tube changing, means you have done it say today and you'd like to do it tomorrow. So naturally the track has already not been formed. So it is always possible that once you take it out on its own, and then there will be loss of track. So it is always advisable you do it under a bougie. A ventilating bougie would be always a better one, but then ventilation bougie is not advisable in a patient of COVID. So it's always better that you put a simple bougie and reload it and put it out. This is the best thing. Otherwise, obviously, you have so many other things. You can go for bronchoscope and then you can reload it. That is also possible. But it is better that you take it out with a Guji.
So
Yeah, I think,
yeah.
I think there was a question. If you just finish it, then we'll go to the next question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that
now
is what I
the
said.
part of it is a tracheostomy and contraction of infection in the healthcare worker in the ICU.
Sorry. The next question is
Tracheostomy and contraction of the infection in the ICU for the healthcare worker.
Obviously the contraction, as I said, firstly you have to take care of the mental setup of your either if they are resident doctors and staff nurses and whatever it is. You cannot make them wear the PPE kit for more than 6 hours. So naturally 6 hours is the ultimate time where after that probably they get exhausted, and there's the moment the patient, the resident doctors or the consultants or the staff, they get exhausted, there's always a possibility of breach in the system of prevention. So one is the time. One has to be very cautious about time. Second is that when you're wearing the PPE kit, because if it is in COVID ICU, you're wearing a PPE kit. When you're wearing a PPE kit, there are certain things, do's and don'ts, which they have to keep in mind. Yeah. So those do's and don'ts needs to be kept in mind, and there is a long list of that. One has to be very cautious and that. And third is whenever you're going for any sort of aerosol generating procedures, so always wear a face shield, head to toe PPE kit. There's no compromise on that. You can wear your goggles also. Now, at times, what has been seen, that is power air purifying system respirator is there. So PAPR is there, where you can use that system if the patient in certain scenarios. But in that case, you will not be able to go for any other, say, auscultation or hearing of things will not be possible. But then that is also gives a good amount of protection and prevents your suffocation over the N95 mask. So PAPR is again a good system of preventing yourself. So prevention is again, it's based on drilling, mock drilling, simulation, training, and then your level of exhaustion, this level of duty, and the patients you're dealing. So they are all based on your prevention. That prevents you from contacting the infection. Otherwise there's no other way.
Yeah, I think there was a question put up by somebody. I'm not getting the name right now. And I think I would ask Apesh Bhai, Amit Bhai, and Dr. Rakesh to address it as to the choice of the neuromuscular blocking agent for intubating the trachea. So if one of you or either all of you can have your own opinion. And the corollary to the question was, should we use succinylcholine when there is no anticipated difficult airway? So I think we'll go alphabetically. We will start with possibly Amit Bhai.
Dr. Amit?
I think either of the drugs, succinylcholine, rapid acting muscle relaxant is must. That is for sure. Rapid acting muscle relaxant. Now we have only two choice rapid acting. One is rocuronium versus succinylcholine. Now rocuronium, if you end up in say unanticipated difficult intubation and you're not able to intubate, the reversal is difficult here. We don't have drug available. So So I would probably go for succinylcholine. Now the succinylcholine can be used in all the cases.
Yes.
Why not? Whenever there is a suspected airway, COVID patient, I think we should use succinylcholine.
Exactly.
Yes, main thing is.
Can I add to this?
Yes, please.
See, the point is in intensive care unit, always remember the no assessment system is 100% guaranteed. So you can land up to any time, any difficult intubation scenario, especially in an intensive care unit. One. Second is that these patients are, one thing which we are saying is to avoid bag mask ventilation. So if you go for a rocuronium, And obviously you need to give at least a period of 2 to 3 minutes, or even say 1.5 to 2 minutes minimum to go for a bag mask ventilation, right? The third thing is that the time during which you need to intubate this patient, that time is bit prolonged with rocuronium than with sux, and we need to ensure our definitive airway as early as possible, so that the patient can because patient should not land up to hypoxia, because their already reserve is less and they are already hypoxic. So early intubation means rapid intubation as early as possible should be our target. So 3 very important things is intubation at a very faster rate, not going for bag mask ventilation. Third is obviously you don't know whether you land up to difficult intubation in a scenario with who is in intensive care.
Yes.